Hi, my name is Kennedy Tiefenbrunn, and this is my final presentation on cystic fibrosis. The first thing I want to do is start off with what is cystic fibrosis. The most simple definition is a progressive genetic disease that causes persistent lung infections and limits the ability to breathe over time. So this image here is just an example of what a healthy airway is supposed to look like, and it shows in the bottom there that the patient with cystic fibrosis, their airway becomes filled with mucus, and that mucus becomes thick and sticky and starts to harden over time. The first case of cystic fibrosis can be dated back to the Middle Ages. It was said to be that infants who had salty kisses were hexed. However, we know now today they weren't hexed. This is probably just the first cases of cystic fibrosis being recorded. The salty kisses are actually kind of a symptom or something that's indicative of children with CF. So then, kind of getting into the 19th and 20th century, there were records of patients having pancreatic lesions and kind of that salty kisses, so to speak, symptom. Then you kind of started getting into, really the 1940s was a big time for cystic fibrosis, where they really started learning about the mucus linings building up, and then they discovered the etiology, which is the CTFR gene mutation. There's actually over 1,700 gene mutations possible, but the CTFR gene sits at 7q31.2 on the long Q arm of chromosome 7. And so basically that's just at position 31.2 is what that long terminology means. But as I say, there's over 1,700 types of mutations to this gene, most relating to cystic fibrosis. And this gene provides instructions for making a channel that transports negatively charged chloride ions in and out of the cell. So when that salt imbalance becomes a problem, that's where the salty kisses come from. And this can also, like I said, increase when that's out of balance. This is what increases that mucus layer where it becomes thick and sticky and starts to harden. So there are several symptoms or physical issues with this genetic disease. It can cause respiratory and digestive system issues. The genetic mutation causes that mucus, like I said, that lubricates and protects the lining of these organs, and it causes them to become abnormally thick and sticky. The disease also causes progressive damage to the respiratory system and can also cause chronic digestive problems. The abnormally clogged airways lead to breathing issues. It also leads to risk for further infection. Most people diagnosed with CF suffer from digestive issues, and this blockage can become to the intestine can happen shortly after birth. And it's that thick, sticky mucus buildup, and it can happen in the pancreas, and then the pancreas then struggles to produce insulin and digestive enzymes, which then again affects that person's digestive tract and how things break down. CF is also considered a fatal disease. However, now with modern treatment and things of that sort, a lot of these children can now live into adulthood. There was actually just a new drug that came out at the end of 2019 that was really popular in the medical world, and it can allow a lot of people to live longer, healthier lives into adulthood. So, the mode of inheritance for this disease is autosomal recessive. So, just a small little breakdown here of how autosomal recessive inheritance works. In order to have parents that don't have the disease, both have to be carriers of the CTFR gene mutation in order to pass it down to their child. They have about a 25% chance of their child actually being afflicted with the disease if they're both carriers, about a 50% chance of them being carriers, and then a 25% chance of them not being afflicted with the disease. This is a breakdown or genetic map that I had created of people with the CTFR gene mutation and cystic fibrosis. So here, it's just a note of the different ways that people can be carriers or be afflicted with the disease, or how people can then not become carriers and go on to have healthy kids and not have to really worry about this. So there's genetic testing available. The most common form is newborn testing. However, there are other types of testing. There's biochemical tests and molecular genetic testing. And then there's also carrier testing for parents, which the DNA is collected from the inside of a person's cheek and then tested within the laboratory. So this is just an example of how some of those molecular tests how they read. It's super interesting. And then, but like I said, the most common form is the newborn testing. It is mandatory in all 50 U.S. states. However, there are some ways to get around that, but for the most part, it's mandatory. It does happen right at birth, shortly a few hours after birth. They take a sample and then it's sent off to labs. So there's not one specific company that really covers that. However, there are several companies where you can expand upon the newborn screening and test for other genetic disorders more than what is mandated. The test is typically free. It can cost up to $150 depending on the state and the insurance, but typically the state pays for it. Early detection is key, though, for children or people that are going to be diagnosed with cystic fibrosis. The earlier the treatment begins, the healthier their lungs stay, healthier their digestive system stays, and then they have a better chance for a longer, happier life. There is some controversy with this type of genetic testing, although not much. Not many people are going to argue against this type of testing, which is, again, why it's mandatory in all 50 states. But, that there would be any cost at all ever could be considered a controversy, as well as the evidence of efficacy and then obtaining prenatal consent. So kind of the issue of getting not technically having the consent of the child, but having the consent of the parent. So, however, these are my references. I hope you enjoyed my presentation on cystic fibrosis. Thank you.